In today's video, we are going to be turning this local charity's website into this using Figma. Let's just get right into it. So this is the current website and we are going to jazz that up today. First things first, we're going to pull in the logo into our Figma file with a 12-column grid. Now, there isn't many high quality images on the website right now, so we're going to have a look on Unsplash and find some appropriate ones that ideally they'd be able to get someone in to shoot photos in that style. So here we're just kind of building out our hero section. We've got a big call to action piece of text that you really want to sum up what the place is about, and you want it to be short enough that people don't really have to read it, they can just glance at it and get a good idea. We're also getting our navigation in here, but at this moment in time we are keeping things super rough, and as you'll see over the course of this website design, I changed things around a lot. And this was largely because when I started this, to be honest, my head just wasn't really in a good place for design, which is really normal, and I think that's actually a good takeaway for this video. You're not always going to be on your top form, and there's going to be times where you have to design, you're going to have to meet a deadline, even though those creative juices just aren't flowing. So up to this point, we've got some kind of hero, and we're just kind of populating that with things that we think are going to be important. Here I'm actually using a technique that I made a tutorial on in my last video, so go watch that if you haven't. But it's for this gradient blur sort of effect, and it's a cool way to sort of highlight text on an image. It does a good job at making it subtle, but kind of baking it into the image itself so it doesn't look too stacked. And you'll see in a second. So it's blurring the background, but that blur fades off with the gradient that is acting as a mask underneath. And then you can actually make it darker as well, just to make it stand out a little bit more, which is what I'm doing here. And as you can see, the text is suddenly becoming far more of a focal point on the image. So we've gotten somewhere with the hero. We have an idea of all the pieces that we need to use, and we're going to play around with this donation bit. Now I will actually come back to this later on in the video and redesign this part completely, because I couldn't quite get anything I liked. And that was largely because, like I said, my head just wasn't really in it. And I think you'll find that the solution that we came up with by the end of the video is a far better result. Here I kind of noticed that the logo doesn't sit very well, so I'm going to experiment with doing some different headers. You know, we could have a fixed header, which I didn't think looked quite good. And what we ended up doing was this, which I think is a better solution, using the logo as a little tab, and I think that just sits nicer on the big image. Moving on to the next section, I wasn't quite sure what this was going to be yet, but I had an idea of a layout in mind. So this is it kind of coming together. We're going to make this leaf shape, and we are going to place an image inside of it. Now, introducing this leaf shape into our design is something that we're actually going to use quite a lot as the design goes on, and you'll see us use it in different ways. But it's a fun way to add an image in that also conveys what the website is about. It's about gardening. It just kind of fits, and it looks better than a square image, I think. So we're just going to chuck in some about text for now. Haven't fully decided if this is even going to be an about section, but I think just starting there, it's going to give us something to work with, which is going to make it easier to design the section that I have in mind. So we're going to add these 3 boxes on top of this leaf. Now this is just going to be some random little stats. It really is just a visual way of showing some of the stuff that the charity has done over the years. We're going to add in these icons. Now I'm just going to use the same icon for this. If you wanted to spend a lot of time, if this was actually for a client, then yes, of course you would get different icons for these. You'd maybe make your own, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to paste in random stats and use the same icon. But you get the gist of how that section should look. Now, I haven't fully decided where that section is going to go on the page, but from working on it, it kind of gave me a new idea for how I want to do the donations part. And you know, I think that's quite a useful point. Like when you're working on a website, sometimes just continuing on, designing another section, it more than often it'll give you ideas for maybe a section that you were stuck on. And that's exactly what happened here. we want to make slightly less of an importance on the donations, because first and foremost, we want people to come to the website and see what the business does. We don't want it to look like one big charity donations page, which I think it did a little before. But including it into the hero like this, where it isn't such a big thing, I just think that's a better balance. Here we're introducing a new section. Now I want to have something that teases continuation. Now, if you have a hero that is 100% the height of the screen, sometimes the user doesn't know to scroll. I mean, human nature, when you come to a page, you kind of automatically want to scroll, but having something that is just kind of leading the eye down the page, like for example, this top of this green box that we're creating, this is going to help lead people down into the website to explore more. And we're going to use that section to talk about the store and some information about the store. So slowly but surely, we are finally getting somewhere with new sections and kind of giving a bit more structure to the page. But there are so many elements that will get changed before the end, from typeface to a lot of the sizes. Like at this point, everything is literally like a sketchboard. You know, some days you might find that you're really fired up for a design and most of the decisions that you make will end up being the final. But like I said, my head was not in this. And so a lot of the decisions that I was making, I do go back and change a lot of things. But as a designer, you'll find that as you slowly get better, the days that you feel like you're not designing very well, the actual standard of work that you're producing will get better and better. And before you know it, your best design ever will be a design that you could bang out on one of those bad days. And that's when you know you're improving. But we're slowly getting somewhere with this design. There's a lot of just moving things about. I've given the header a little bit more structure, and I want to see how this hero looks with some different images. This image is a little bit too light, but you know, it's always fun to play around with things like that. And I can think of a number of images that would work in this hero. So we would be fine with the client shooting some similar images, or actually a video would work really good here that was just auto playing in the background. A video can always tell so much about what the company does. You know, a video is 24 photos a second. And that's a lot of information and a lot of file size. So you don't want to slow your website down too much. Right, here we've just added a browser tab at the top. Now that's just going to help us when it comes to the prototype window of seeing how this is actually going to look. We're going to add in a bit of text here that just explains a bit more about the company, because the header that we have in the hero is quite short. So we're going to make no mistake of it. When people come to this website, they will know exactly what it's about. And we're going to work in a little bush here, like we're Bob Ross or something. We're just going to paint in a lovely little bush that is just fitting with the overall brand of the website. When you're designing, I feel like every so often you're maybe working with quite a generic layout and then you get some radical, crazy idea. Now, a lot of the times those ideas are not going to be the most effective solution, but if you've got the time, I think it's always fun to like play around with it. And I think that's how you end up stumbling across great design. I think you've got to discover great design, and you can only do that by trying different things and failing a bunch. Because so much web design these days is just a copy of a copy of a copy, and that's fine. I mean, I do it myself. I think that's part of being a good designer, is realizing good design and what works. What works for one thing might work well for another thing. A lot of the stuff is the same, but if you can create something that's unique in your own, then that's really going to make your work stand out. And I think that's what makes a good designer. So whilst I've been rambling there, we've been working on a new section, which is these 3 call to actions that just kind of leads the user into the website. Now, whilst I'm building these out, I am being quite rough with it, just because I'm not quite sure in my head how I want them to look. But you will see them come together, and that little bush that we created up there behind the visit our shop box, that's going to come into play with these boxes, because everything is connected. I've been using this blobs plugin for Figma recently. It just kind of creates a unique shape. I think I actually used it in my last video as well. It's just quite a fun way of framing an image or, you know, a blob. It's definitely not the sort of thing you'd use on any website, but I think for something like this, that you want to have quite a soft, playful tone to it, I think it's going to work quite well. Now I'm just experimenting with what color the box should be. Ultimately, I do decide that it should just be white. And here we're going to paste in an image, and we're just going to duplicate this out just now, even though it's not final, and we do change it up a little bit. But duplicating it out before helps you see it all together, and it could influence how you want each of them to actually be designed. So it's always good to do that. Here we're just changing up the names for the different parts of the website. Now these could be anything. I've just kind of used random pages off the website that I think would be important for the users to know about. And here we're adding more blobs, and it just looks kind of cool. One thing to think about as well when you're designing, so with all these blobs and kind of quirky little design things that aren't essential, they open up a lot of possibilities when it comes to development, because you could have some cool animations with these. So whenever I'm designing anything, I'm always thinking about the user interacting with these things or scrolling down the page, and you know what certain things could do. But at the same time, I will just say I'm a strong advocate for websites that don't have a ton of animation, because I do think, you know, a lot of the websites you see on awards and a lot of that, it's not to my liking. I think a lot of it is cool, but a lot of it is so not practical, and you can definitely go overboard with it. So don't go overboard with it, but have fun. I told you we were going to use that leaf shape later on. Well, as you can see, we're using it behind this section, and it's just going to give the website a more cohesive feel. And the more little things like this you add, the more ideas it can give you later down the line. And that's like why whenever I start a design, I do it as such a rough sketch to begin with, because I could go from one section to another, and a new section I design might make me want to completely change the first section based off of it. So everything is subject to change, and you slowly chip away at it to get a more complete design. And that exact process that I just described couldn't be more true for this website, because as you guys can see, we kind of jump around a lot, go to one section, then change up another section. Now, the disadvantage of this is you need to keep going over the design and making sure that everything is going to be consistent. I actually got a comment on one of my recent videos saying, oh, why are you not using auto layout, blah blah blah, this is trash. Well, the reason is because of the way that I design, and I think it's a good way to design, not to say that everyone has to do it, but it works for me to keep it rough. Because if you're doing auto layout and you're really constricting yourself and you're making everything super awkward to then take out of auto layout, all of this, if you're making variables, components, all of this, all of that is changeable, but it is just much easier just to drag it and change it on the page. For most things, and I'm not saying I don't use those things, I definitely do use auto layout and variables and components. Like, they're all super useful, especially when you get into design systems and working with dashboards and a lot of repeated elements. But on an initial website sketching sort of phase, nah, you don't need to be doing it much at all. But anyways, we're almost finished with the website design. We're just working on this last call to action, which would be to donate or to come visit, which I would say are the two most important things about the website. You want people to come visit, support the store, check out the place, and, you know, a little reminder that they can update if they want is always going to be good at the end of the page. How to find us is going to be important, so we're going to put that in there. We're just going to use like a map. Now, obviously on the actual website, that would be like an interactive map. Then we're just going to add in how to find the place as well. We're going to put in the address here. One of the first things that we did when we started this project was we made a 12-column grid. Now, a grid is important as a guide, but it doesn't mean you need to be fully locked into it. It can just help with how you want to position things. But when I'm positioning things on page, a lot of the times I'm positioning it to think in percentages rather than a fixed grid. So You know, if I'm making something 1/3 of the page, half of the page, is it going to be wrapped in a container? All of this sort of stuff. So don't get yourself too locked into a grid, especially if it's a fairly simple website. But here we're making a footer and we're just going to be dragging in a lot of the information that we already have, but we want to have this information available on every page, and having it in a footer is a good way of doing that. And they actually have this award, so we're going to add that in there because that's not mentioned very much, and that's probably an important thing. I don't know what that word means, but it looks good, so we're going to add it. The Queen's Award. And there we have everything on the page that should be, as you guys can see. Just do a quick prototype view of it. We've got this section, then it goes on to a little bit of an about section, or that could be anything really. Then we've got further call to actions, and then all the info at the end. But we are not done. There's a lot of things that need to be tidied up, and this for me is the most fun part of web design. It's when you're nearing the end of a design, you've got everything in, you can really get creative with it. It's almost like you can look at your design and redesign your design. You know, it's a lot easier to look at a website that's been made and be like, oh, I would do it like that, I would do it like that, once all the things are kind of in place. And that's what you get to do with your own design. So at this stage, that's when it can really start to take shape. And as you'll see, I'll just time lapse a lot of this because I end up changing things around quite a bit, but it's at this point where I'll achieve a lot of balance and get the spacing and sizing of everything appropriate, and yeah, just the kind of finishing touches of the website that you would then send to the client. When I'm designing these websites for these videos, it does take a lot of time, and I don't fully polish them in the same way because the client doesn't actually exist. In this case, I'm just doing this website as a demonstration into the thought process behind design and kind of seeing a real world example of building out a website for a client. But yeah, my spacing and sizing and stuff, I would definitely clean up before actually sending to the client. But you get the gist. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this sort of video, please hit the like button and subscribe. These videos do take me a long time to make. I think there's some good information in here, so if you guys do like it, please consider supporting the channel, and I'll catch you guys soon with another video.